Hi, I'm Chad, and you're watching Squarebody Stuff. What's going on, everybody? I'm back in the shop. We got done with our vacation, had a good time. Go watch that video if you want, and check it out. We had a good time down in Texas and hanging out with some friends, and yeah, and getting new friends. Little Tex, he's out by the house right now. He's not much of a shop dog yet. We'll work on that. Springtime's always real busy for me, so yeah. But I think I've got everything pretty well wrapped up, set aside, or done, so I can get back in the shop and get back on this thing here. If you're not familiar with what this is a 339 stroker small block Chevy, 305 block, 375 inch stroke crankshaft, 400 or 383 stroke crankshaft. So yeah, it comes out to 339 cubic inches whenever you bore it out to 60 over. I got plenty of other videos on this build up to where we're at right now, but it has been a while since I've done anything with it. I had to just kind of wrap it up, set it aside, but now we're gonna get back on it. And where we left off on this was I had the bottom end, everything put together. I just didn't have the rod bolts torqued or stretched, and this is what this video is going to be about. I'm going to go over how I stretch the rod bolts, maybe just touch briefly on the difference between torquing and using the stretch method on rod bolts, and I'll yeah, kind of go over some of that. Try to keep it short, sweet, and informative, and also give you some ideas of some homework you could do on your own to learn more about the process. Well, Big Tex has decided to come join us in the shop. Say hi, Big Tex. I'm a big wasp. Hi, guys. Hopefully he'll get used to the shop life. He's done real good so far. We do have a little pen, but been keeping him pinned up at night and while we're gone at work. But the last couple days we've been trying it out because, well, he's just headed right back to the house. He loves just laying right in the front door or right by the front door of the house. Yeah, so it works out pretty good. All right, enough of that. You guys are here to watch me put together an engine. So let's get started on the topic of, should I torque the bolts or should I stretch the bolts, the hows and whys and what all that, stuff. Also, I want to show, what kind of a setup I've got. These are I-beam rods, chromoly I-beam rods. They've got the 7/16 bolts instead of the typical small block Chevy stud with the nut on it. So with that, ARP fasteners, and I need to backtrack a little bit. Another reason why I kind of got stalled out on this part of the project is because these are Speedmaster rods, and when I ordered them, I didn't upgrade to the ARP rod bolts, and I should have. I would have been money ahead. But this is another good point to make with why we do the stretch method. Now, this is one of the rod bolts that actually came with the rods. Decent looking bolts, look almost identical to the ARP bolts as far as, looking at for the naked eye. The finish on the threads may be a little bit rougher, but as I was checking the stretch on these bolts, I had one on that just wouldn't quit stretching. It just, yeah, it was soft. I could tell just by the way they feel, and it, yeah, whenever I stretched it, took the torque off of it to check it again, make sure it didn't stretch, just didn't feel right, it didn't spring back. So I had to go figure out which rod bolts I needed. They're kind of a standard bolt, a 7/16, 1.6 underhead length. I ordered ARP 2000 bolts. They're actually for Eagle rods. So the package on them says for Eagle rods, has Eagle instruction sheet with it and everything. But good rod bolts in here. All my other fasteners in this engine are ARP. So yeah, got good rod bolts in it now. I have already gone through 3 through 8. Those are already done, as indicated by my pink marks. That's the only That's the only color paint marker I had left, so that's what I'm using. It kind of looks cool, but so I've left the number 1 and 2 rods undone, so I kind of show you what I do. Now this is the lube that I'm using for the fasteners. Pretty much all the fasteners in this engine have been used this ARP Ultra Torque, Ultra Torque assembly lube. This is good stuff for your fasteners. Your fasteners usually come with a little like sleeve of it or tube of it or whatever, and I just empty those into this jug. That way it never really goes empty. Always good stuff to have around. Good lubricant. Use it. So I'm going to briefly touch on the difference between torquing and stretching, just the basics of the mechanical part of it. Torquing a bolt, we've all torqued bolts down. You use your torque wrench, set it at a certain value, pull it till it clicks or till it beeps, whatever type of torque wrench you have. Now stretching a bolt is you actually have to measure the free length of the bolt when it's not torqued down or tightened down, and then you torque it down and measure how much it has stretched. For years I've gotten by with just torquing down rod bolts, but rod bolts are one of the highest stressed fastener in an engine, especially when you get into making more horsepower, spending more RPM. There's just a lot of stuff going on there. Those little guys are holding everything together. All right, so it's kind of hard for me to really explain. I'm not good at explaining stuff, exactly what's going on when you stretch a rod bolt or stretch a bolt, but I've read up, try to get some words, to figure out how to explain it to you. I would suggest just do a Google search on torque versus stretch rod bolts, something like that, or rod bolts torque versus stretch. There's a lot of good articles on the internet that explain it way better than I can, but the short and simple maybe version of it I could put into words is, and how a lot of them explain it, is that bolt is got enough, it's got some spring in it, so you can actually stretch it out just like a slinky or anything else, or a regular spring. You can stretch it out so much and it'll come right back to where it was. If you overstretch it, then it's gone too far, it loses its memory, and it won't come back. You don't want that. Obviously bolt manufacturers, they've got it all figured out. They've got the specs and all that stuff to give you. Now why is stretching better than the torque? Well, it takes out a lot of the variables. You're actually measuring the stretch of the bolt. With just the torque method, you've got the variables of friction. If your threads are a little bit, not the best finish, if your mating surfaces, where your head or your bolt, the head of your bolt, the shoulder of your bolt, if it has any friction there, if the lubricant you're using isn't as slick, those will all mess with the torque value. Also, you're also relying on a possibly not 100% calibrated torque wrench. I know mine haven't been calibrated in forever, so I'm not real sure where they're at. I've got 2 or 3 of them, so I kind of test them every once in a while against each other, and either they're all off or they're all good. I don't know, they're all pretty much the same. That's kind of the simple explanation of why we stretch the rod bolts, and these bolts have little dimples in the end, both ends, to where you can use a little guy like this. This is stretch gauge. Yes, this is one of the cheaper ones. You can get way better ones. ARP has them, Comp has them, I think. I mean, there's some really nice ones out there. This one works, but yeah, you put it in there and you'll get your measurement of your rod or your bolt. Well, I hope that's kind of covered the whys. Let's go over the hows. Now the how-to part of this is how I do it. This is how I learned to do it, how I've been showed to do it, and what works best for me with the tools I have. Now the instruction sheet that came with the rod bolts say to do it a little bit differently. They say to have the stretch gauge on the bolt as you tighten it down with a open end wrench or a box end combination wrench, and have one smooth motion, tighten it down until you get your stretch value, which on these particular bolts is around 6 thousandths. The problem with that is my gauge will not just stay on the bolt. It doesn't have enough spring pressure to hold itself on the bolt, and to have I have to put a pipe on a combination wrench to do all that. There's quite a bit of torque. These are, if they were to just torque these bolts down, they start out at 75 foot-pounds. So the method I use, and I've seen several other engine builders use the same method, is I will measure the free length of the bolt before it's tightened down. I write that down, and each cylinder or each rod, the inside and outside bolt, which the inside bolt is the one closest to the inside of the engine, the outside one obviously is the outer one, and I'll go through and I'll write down all of those numbers. After I make sure that this is zeroed, I always zero it with a 1-inch standard. This is a little standard that comes with my micrometer set, so I can check everything. But I will zero it out at 1 inch, and also zero this little dial in there out. Everything's zeroed at 1 inch. And you don't really have to do that, I guess, as long as you're as long as this stays the same throughout all your measurements. But I like to zero it out, that way I know it's at 1 inch, and that way I can come back if I have an issue with this engine on down the road, rod bolt lets go or something happens, or I'm just tearing it down to freshen it up. I can go back to these measurements, set my gauge at 1 inch, zero it out at 1 inch, and I can go back and check all my rod bolts, make sure that they're not stretched too far, or whenever I pull it apart with no torque or no load on them, I could check and make sure they haven't stretched. So that's the reason why I zero that out. And yeah, so how do I set that, or how do we set that? How do we know how far to go, how far to stretch it? Where do we start at? What I start with is I set my torque wrench to the specified torque rating from the manufacturer. As I said, 75 foot-pounds is what they say for these if you're just going to torque them down. So once you go through and torque all of them down to 75 foot-pounds, I will check the stretch on all of them, see how far I need to go. Then I'll go back to, I usually start out on like number 8 for some reason, and back them all off. I'll increase my torque about 5 to 10 pounds, do another pull on them, and I'll do number 8. I won't go through all of them again. I'll go through number 8, check it, check the stretch. If it needs more, then I'll go on to like number 7. I'll increase my torque rating or torque a little bit. If I still need to go more, I'll move to number 6, increase it. I'll do that until I get the proper amount of stretch, and then I'll go back through, and because if all the rod bolts are right and good, you should be able to find your maximum torque reading for the proper amount of stretch, and go through and torque all of them down to that rating, and they should all stretch the same amount. That clear as mud. It's a little confusing, it's very time consuming, and I'm not very good at explaining stuff sometimes. I'm a better doer than explainer, but I'm doing my best. Just follow with me. So once I find out how much torque it needs to get the proper amount of stretch, I'll loosen them all up, and I will actually start like 5 to 10 pounds less than that maximum value, go back through, torque them all down, check the stretch on them, and if it's not enough, then I can increase the torque on each one of them until I get the proper amount of stretch. But every time you do that, every time you re-tighten it down to stretch it, you need to back it all the way off. So now we're going to do the number 1 and 2. I've got my torque wrench set to like 10 pounds less than the maximum one, or maximum amount that took to stretch all the rest of them, because I don't want to end up having a rod bolt that's maybe a little bit softer and overstretch it right off the bat. So we'll go ahead and just pull on it. Now if everything's right, these should be not quite stretched to the point where I need them to, but I'm going to double check and make sure. Alright, now that we got the bolts torqued, and I forgot to mention, I'm not sure if I mentioned or not, The actual torque reading that you end up with to get the proper amount of stretch, it doesn't really matter. We're not worried about that. We're just worried about bolt stretch. So if it's 5, 10, 15, maybe sometimes 20 pounds more than what the factory specification is, that really doesn't matter, because we're stretching this fastener to its best yield point, or some fancy word to explain it right, I don't know. But the torque value doesn't really matter. It's the stretch value is what we're after. Well, hey Tex, you come to learn how to build engines? Maybe you can teach me. All right, so we'll get our stretch gauge and get it set in the little dimples. It's gonna be hard to read because I got the camera kind of right in my way, and I try to hold it and get it in there, and we're at 1,785 it looks like, and that's number 2 outside. Okay, so we've only got 4 thousandths of stretch at that torque value, so I know I need to go higher. So I'm gonna check these other 3, and then if they need more torque on them to get the stretch, then I'll do that. Like I was saying earlier, I backed my torque wrench off about 10 pounds from the maximum that I took to get the other ones, just to make sure I didn't overstretch them. All 4 of these got stretched to 5 thousandths. With that torque rating, I need another thousandth of stretch. 6 is about where they want them. So I'm gonna back them all off, increase the torque wrench pressure and that other 10 pounds, and we should be good. Alright, they're all come within spec, right around 6 thousandths of stretch, right where ARP says they want them. Got my dots on them. Bottom end is complete together. I got a short block now. Next step, we're going to be putting the oil pump in, stuff like that, but that'll be in the next video. We still got a little ways to go on this engine. I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully you learned something. Like I said, this is just showing you how I do stuff. This is not the be-all, end-all, only way to do things. Do your research, do what feels comfortable to you, do what you can do with the tools that you have, and always have fun, enjoy doing it. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below if you're not already subscribed, and hit that join button next to it, because you can go there and join, become a member, and you know, donate a little bit of money. I think the lowest one's 99 cents a month. You know, if I had every one of you subscribers donate 99 cents a month, I could quit my day job and do this full time and not have so much time in between videos and projects, and yeah, it'd be great. So hit that join button, check that out. Again, thanks for watching. Hopefully won't be too long before I start putting the oil pump in and do all that stuff. So stay tuned, keep your square bodies rolling, and we'll catch you later.